Support for the Brülosophy podcast comes from the following. Love to Brew is a national leader in homebrewing supplies, offering exclusive products such as East Coast yeast, TV taps, and Brülosophy recipe kits, all with free shipping on orders over $75. When you need brewing ingredients or equipment, check out Love to Brew at love2brew.com. The best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world. Find everything from classics to modern favorites, as well as cool experimental varieties and a vast array of ingredients and gear at yakimavalleyhops.com. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of the Brülosophy podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and in this episode, contributor Ray Found and I are going to be talking about a pretty specific ingredient that many homebrewers use as a matter of course in, a lot of their beers.
Yeah, Carapils is an included component in a lot of homebrew kits, especially the type that new brewers often get. And it's always been something that's been a bit of curiosity. What does it actually do? Why do we use it? A lot of people think of it as like an insurance policy for having a nice, frothy foam on top of their beer. I wanted to put that to the test.
Yeah, I think the two things that I hear Carapils as being sold for the most is its impact on foam, head retention lacing, as well as mouthfeel and the body of a beer. And I know, when I bought my first kit back in 2003, the dude who sold it to me, his name was Mars. I bring this guy up a lot. I should find him and bring him on the show at some point.
Is he still in the brewing industry?
I mean, I have no idea. I moved away from Bellingham years ago, but I should call him up. I should do that. Call up North Corner Brewing Supply in Bellingham. Anyways, we digress. I remember Mars telling me though that, Carapils is just something you use in your beer, in every beer that you homebrew, for these reasons,
Yeah, because nobody wants a beer that's overly thin. Certainly the new craft beer lover or homebrewer is often looking for a beer that's richer, more robust than the traditional American light lager, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that one of the issues that, and I'll admit to having this issue when I first started brewing, and I definitely taste homebrewed beers that have that issue of just being too watery and too thin. And, Carapils was kind of sold as this panacea, the thing that fixes that issue. And so, I'll admit the first 20 or so batches I made, I didn't even consider not putting Carapils in. They were just a part of every single one of my recipes. I'm sure the same is.
Yeah, I think I only ever brewed maybe one batch. My first batch was a recipe kit from More Beer. And I know it had a little bit of Carapils in it. And then after that, I brewed a few batches of my own recipes without it. And then at one point, I was a little bit unhappy with the head retention on a particular beer. And I picked up like 3 or 4 pounds of Carapils, got it all ground, and I just added like a 1/4 pound, 1/2 pound to basically every recipe on brew day, sort of out of habit. And as an insurance policy almost against low head retention. But eventually I ran out and just sort of stopped doing that and didn't really notice a change.
Yeah, interesting. Well, before we get into this entire episode on a single ingredient, Carapils, we got a few things to talk about first. Some announcements. I know it's early, not even 2018 yet, but HomebrewCon 2018 will be here before we know it. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that they should start planning now. It's the event of the year for every homebrewer. It's going to be so fun. I think we've almost convinced Ray to come to this one, and pretty much everybody else with Brülosophy is on board. We've got some crazy plans with Yakima Valley hops and Imperial Organic yeast. We are going to be collaborating on some really killer events that you guys aren't going to want to miss out on. The conference starts June 28th and goes through June 30th. So mark your calendars now. Just do it ahead of time. Plan early, that way it doesn't hurt so bad when you get there. But if you want to get the most out of your trip, I'd recommend coming into town early-ish, something like, Wednesday afternoon. That's June 27th of 2018. We will not be doing a pre-funk party this year like we did last year. To be honest, it was just a little too much. It took a lot of energy for us to plan that out, but not to worry. We have definitely got some badass stuff in the works. I can't go into too much detail yet, mainly because we don't have all the details nailed down, but we will be sharing them as soon as we get stuff squared away. It's only to entice people to come out. But I'll tell you what, when you got folks like Yakima Valley Hops and Imperial Yeast collaborating with Brülosophy, there's bound to be some good times. Until then, make sure you go check out what the awesome folks over at Yakima Valley Hops and Imperial are doing. You can go to their websites, yakimavalleyhops.com and imperialyeast.com for the best hops and yeast. Another quick plug. I recently had the joy of consulting with an attorney, which sounds crazy, but John from Beer Law Center truly is a standout guy. If you listen to the Brewing Network, I'm sure you've heard about this person before. Thanks to his help, an issue that we were dealing with was handled better and quicker than I could ever have imagined. As kind as he is knowledgeable, John just published a book that I believe is an absolute must for anyone currently in or planning to enter the world of brewing and beer. It's called Beer Law: What Brewers Need to Know, and it's available on Amazon. As an added bonus, everyone's favorite brewcaster, Jason J.P. Petros from the Brewing Network, wrote the foreword. So at the very least, you can get a little bit of entertainment from that, and you can go make fun of JP later. Seriously, though, don't mess around. Learn what you need to know now. Go buy this book. It's available on Amazon.com and other bookstores as well. Another quick reminder, if you want to participate in the weirdness we do here at Brülosophy and you live in the following cities, let us know, and we will get you involved. We've got contributors in Denver, Colorado, Pueblo, Colorado, Anchorage, Alaska, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Atlanta, Georgia, Corona, California, Chicago, Illinois, and Fresno, California. Do not be shy. We don't just want you. We sort of need you. All right. We're constantly compiling questions for our Brew and A episodes, which we're currently planning to put out there every 10 shows. If you have any questions, email them to me, marshall@brülosophy.com, or you can ask them on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or any of the other online forums we frequent. Also, let us know what you think of these episodes. I'm more than happy to put them out there more frequently if that's what people want. Okie doke. If you'd like to support what we're doing here, you can visit brülosophy.com/support for a list of links to use when you shop at places like Amazon, More Beer, Adventures in Homebrewing, Love to Brew, and other online shops you're probably already buying stuff from. By using our links, you support our efforts without even noticing it. It's as simple as that. If you want to be rewarded for your support, head over to patreon.com/Brülosophy, where for as little as $1 per month, you'll receive never before published Brülosophy recipes, receive invites to monthly video chats, and our top supporters even get to work with us to design and be a part of their very own experiment. It's really cool. Again, for more information, you can head over to patreon.com/Brülosophy. I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. The feedback has been fantastic. If you haven't done this, please do so. It really is helpful for various reasons, and we'd appreciate it immensely. Plus, you'll get a notification whenever we release a new episode, which, as I've mentioned before, is going to be weekly starting in January of 2018. We are really excited for that. All right, we got a little bit of feedback from after the last episode on First Wort hops that I want to go over here in the episode, maybe some stuff we can address. I heard from a bunch of people saying that they plan to give the method a shot, if only to avoid the whole boil over that can happen with the first kettle hop edition. However, one person, John Frederick, had a really interesting comment I want to address here. He says, like many topics, I think the answer is it depends. And here he's referring to the answer on does First Wort hop make a difference? I do believe that if it has any impact, that hop variety is key. The idea of extracting terpene glycosides makes sense. Transformation of the free terpenoids could also be playing a role. If the free terpenoids can be converted to their oxides or other compounds such as aterpenol or terpen 4-ol, I don't know what that is, they would be less volatile during the boil and carry over to the final beer. These compounds are less floral than, say, linalool, but also have a slightly woodsy mouthfeel that people could mistake for a rounder bitterness. That's really interesting. And basically, if I could distill this down to what I think he's saying, it's that First Wort hop additions might actually be dependent on the variety being used.
I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. If you look at some of the spec sheets for these hops, they contain wildly variant amounts of the different compounds. And so it's probably foolish to assume that, what's true for one is true for all. I mean, I think that's not I think sometimes we want to generalize things that don't necessarily deserve that sort of generalizable.
Yeah, no. I absolutely, I like where he's headed with this thought, where John's headed with this thought, and definitely plan to continue experimenting with it. As we pointed out in that last episode, there are these kind of two perspectives when it comes to first wort hopping. The Americanized version, which is relying on that first wort hop edition, kind of to replace your typical 60-minute bittering edition. And then there's this German perspective where you're taking 30% of the later kettle hop editions and using that as the first wort hop edition. This is something that Will Allwart also commented on. He said he would love to see us do an experiment testing that stuff out, this traditional German approach as we spoke of it. And he says maybe a simple pale ale with Magnum for a bittering edition and one aroma edition at 180 degrees Fahrenheit, whirlpool of a low cohumulone hop like Citra, make the whirlpool edition quite large, like 2 to 3 ounces, and take the 30% from that edition. He says he'd love to see these results. What do you think of that one, Ray? That sounds like, to me, it might actually work, because Matt and I were struggling to figure out a way to test that out.
I think it's an interesting idea, and it's not going to take a whole lot of convincing to get one of us to brew, a pale ale with a bunch of Citra in it. So, yeah. I think it's an interesting idea. I'm still, I'm personally a bit skeptical. But I guess that's sort of our job at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting concept. And like I say, it makes sense to me for it to be somewhat variant from one hop variety to another. We often make the, disclaimer on some of these experiments that, this was true in the case of this particular beer on this particular wort with this particular yeast. And the results of an experiment may or may not be generalizable.
Yeah, no, that's true. And for this one, I still struggle to see how we wouldn't be able to say that any perceived difference, if it were significant, wasn't because of the higher IBU contribution from that first wort hop edition. And maybe it would balance itself out, and who knows, maybe the difference just wouldn't be strong enough, which we could have lab tested for people to tell a difference based on bitterness. Who knows? But that's
my only hesitation for the method proposed was on the 180 degree hop stand. I haven't seen that as a quote unquote German method. That seems like a sort of revisionist.
The kind of an American, get as much hop character as you can method.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah. I'm not sure where his thinking is there. If he's hoping that maybe by dropping the temperature for that steep that you would reduce the amount of IBU contribution or something. I'm not sure what the thought process is there, but even still, I think it's an interesting idea, and I like Citra.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks for signing up. Will, good feedback. I appreciate it. And we will be messing around more with first wort hopping in the future. Final piece of feedback comes from Brett Young. He says, another great episode. That was the first wort hop episode. I love the 1 minute beer reviews with Jersey and Tim. Keep up the great work. Well, Brett, we appreciate the feedback, and I'm glad you like them as well. I know that this has become kind of a thing that, most people seem to enjoy it, and some people probably skip over it, but we love it, and I love Jersey, and I love Tim. And for this episode, I had my friends Jersey and Tim review a beer that was sent in by Will Watson from Arkansas. This is the dude that goes by Hi Hat Brewing, who sent in the Mexican lager that the three of us enjoyed a while back. This time he switched gears a bit and went with something that has a little bit more oomph, an Imperial Coffee Stout. What did the guys think when drinking it blind?
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
Very dark. I want to rework my contract.
Smells much like coffee.
Well, then drink it. Old people love coffee.
Tastes nothing like coffee. It's good, though.
Oh, it smells like someone farted Guinness. Hang on.
Oak?
It's a stout. It's like a Guinnessy. It's like a fruity Guinness. It's like a...
I don't get any fruit.
Let me guess. You get... what was it? Come on.
I'm not saying...
Juniper! What's the
not.
juniper content on a level of 0 to 10?
1.
Okay, that's what I thought. I also don't get Jupiter. It's chocolatey?
Yeah, it's chocolatey.
Chocolatey?
Very.
Chocolatey?
Yeah, this works.
Yeah, I'll do it. This one's good. It's the chocolatiest chocolate beer I've ever had. It would be good with a slice of ice cream in it. Vanilla, perhaps?
Perhaps.
It's very portery.
Never gonna hear the end of that one.
Come on, Jeeves. It's a very portery beer.
That's it.
Scale of 1 to 10. What do you think?
We're gonna go with a 6.
I'll take a 7. Better than you.
Well, let's chalk that up to another win for Will. This was the guys didn't hate the beer, which, given the fact that it was 8.9%, as black as oil, and a stout, that's not really in these dudes' wheelhouse, and they still enjoyed the beer. They thought it tasted like chocolate. As for me, I thought the beer was pretty good. I don't typically do coffee beers, and add that to the fact that I also don't typically do imperial beers. The fact that I didn't spit the stuff out and I finished my glass, I think it says something. So good job, Will. Some comments on this batch. It was a 2.5 gallon batch made with Maris Otter, C80, some roasted barley. He added some coffee in there somewhere, but I don't see it on the list. So anyways, Imperial Coffee Stout. Good stuff, Will. Thanks for sending it in. If you have a beer that you want to have reviewed by Jersey and Tim, shoot me an email, marshall@brülosophy.com, and we'll get it all set up. We've got a trove of listener beers lined up for future episodes. It's going to be fantastic. Alrighty, time for a quick break. When we return, Ray and I will be focusing on the purported impact Carapils has on beer. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste time chilling wort, which is why I use cleverly designed immersion chillers from Jaded Brewing. After some bad experiences with counterflow and plate chillers, I began the search for a more efficient chilling solution and discovered Jaded. That was nearly 4 years ago, and to this day, I continue to rely on the King Cobra and the Hydra to chill my wort in record time without the setup or cleaning hassle of other chillers. If you're looking for a way to optimize your brew day, I can't recommend Jaded chillers enough. Go see what they have to offer at jadedbrewing.com and let them know Brülosophy sent you. Like I said earlier, every batch that I made for the first year or two after I started brewing included a pretty hefty dose, 5% or so of Carapils, just as a matter of course.
And Carapils, for those that aren't aware, is a dextrin malt. It's actually the trade name in the United States for Breese's brand of a dextrin malt, and they advertise it as being sort of the one-stop shop for improving foam stability, head retention, lacing, but also for improving mouthfeel, especially marketed for beers like Session IPA and things like that, where you're trying to get that richer body without a whole bunch of additional gravity points.
So this is a grain that's typically used, or maybe not typically, but it's going to have maybe a stronger impact purportedly in lower OG beers.
That's certainly the way it's marketed. Is that for the lower OG beers is that you can get the perception of a quote unquote bigger beer by getting the mouthfeel and the head retention from a dextrin malt, in this case Carapils, rather than
so dextrin malt. What let's talk a little bit about kind of because Carapils fits in this under the general umbrella of a dextrin malt. What exactly is a dextrin malt? What's its intended purposes? How, what is that?
Yeah, so dextrin is a general term for a group of long chain polysaccharides or long chain sugars. In a lot of processed food products and things like that, you'll find maltodextrin, which is one of the dextrins made from maltose. Maltose is two glucose molecules. A sucrose is a glucose and a fructose. Dextrins are, I think, defined as longer than 4 chain, but I think they go all the way up to like 20 chain polysaccharides, where it's just glucose molecules linked together end to end to end.
By long chain, that makes them less digestible or by yeast or in essence unfermentable. So those stick around post fermentation.
Yeah, most yeast, as far as I understand it, is really good at single and double chain sugars. So fructose, glucose, maltose. Lager yeast especially is known for being quite fermentable on maltotriose, which is 3 glucose molecules. Beyond that, fermentability apparently drops off quite dramatically. And so the idea behind dextrins is that they are long-chain sugars or long-chain carbohydrates, if you will, that can be left in the residual beer. But just as the yeast don't consume them, they also aren't known for being sweet per se. And I say this, one way I can explain this is that a good friend of mine is a ultra distance runner. And instead of just drinking plain water or Gatorade or something like that when he's out, he actually mixes maltodextrin with water and drinks that. So he's getting he's going on these long 20 mile runs, and he drinks this basically maltodextrin soup as he runs. And it tastes essentially just like, quite similar to water. I think he adds a little bit of a fruit flavoring or something in it, but it's not sweet like Gatorade or Kool-Aid might be, but it gives him calories as he goes.
And so the idea there being that it kind of, to dumb it down, it just stays around longer. These longer chain sugars just kind of stick around longer and are metabolized much slower.
Right. And this is also what's, to some degree, what's being broken down in the mash is where, our beta and alpha amylase enzymes are taking long-chain carbohydrates that could, essentially be called dextrins, and breaking them into our maltose and our maltotriose and our, simpler chain
So when
sugars.
when I think about Carapils being used in, when I think about the impact of Carapils, at least, it kind of reminds me a little bit about what an all grain brewer can try to aim for with mash temperature. Higher mash temperature leading to a less fermentable wort, and a lower mash temperature, favoring that beta amylase and leading to a more fermentable wort. It sounds like Carapils is sort of like a grain that was produced to act as sort of a kind of a surrogate mash temperature adjustment.
Yeah, and when you put it that way, it leaves you with a bit of a curiosity of, why bother? And that was actually...
At least for all grain brewers, right?
Right. But yeah, one of the questions that I always had was, I'm putting this in there. If I want more dextrins, why not just mash 3 degrees higher?
Yeah, that definitely impacted my use of Carapils a long time ago before we experimented with it. Before we talk about our experiment, what's the history? I know that Briess is the one who makes Carapils, and they kind of own that name. But what is it? How is it made? What's the science behind how it works?
So Briess is a bit cagey. They're quite proud of the fact that they've owned this trademark and stuff since the 40s. It is a trade name in the U.S. As Carapils under the Briess brand. As I understand it, in other parts of the world, other maltsters could manufacture a malt and call it a Carapils, so it can be a generic term outside of the U.S. But Briess is a bit cagey. You'll see different things. So, there's an old BYO column from Mr. Wizard, which was Jamil as far as I remember, where he talks about it being essentially a very light crystal malt. Briess, on the other hand, says that it's not really a crystal malt, but at the same time, they say it's glassy. It's a glassy kernel. It's got no enzymes. They're using Cara in the name. So I think our best clue is probably that it's steeped at a higher temperature to convert, just like a caramel malt, but then not kilned hot enough to gain a bunch of color. In fact, it's basically the same color as Pilsner malt or Pale Two Row. It's 1.5, 2.0 Levibond.
So when I got to the point in homebrewing where I thought I knew everything, which is, a normal part of the process, I think, I took the name Carapils to mean caramel Pilsner malt. And by that, I definitely associated it with other, Briess's other caramel malts, their C10 and C60 and all that other stuff that we use, and just kind of presumed that it was produced the same way and had the same impact, just with a lower Levibond.
That makes some sense. I think that's certainly what the name implies. On the other hand, if it was just that, it's a bit of an oddity that they don't just call it, C2. So there probably is something to Brice's objection there, that it's not just exactly the same as a caramel malt. Although, for example, Bruin Water treats it as a caramel malt, for calculations in terms of pH and things like that, and that seems to work fine. I've never had Bruin Water lead me wrong.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat. And what are typical usage rates of Carapils? I've heard don't go over 5%, or I know some people who are tossing in upwards of 10%.
Yeah. So Brice markets it as being effective at as low as 2 to 3%. To get the foam retention benefits and things like that. And then they're pushing as much as 10% or so to get mouthfeel and things like that. Particularly, it seems to be marketed primarily as sort of a fix-it malt in that way, as if there's a challenge with a beer in terms of mouthfeel, you can, use it as much as 10% or so without changing the overall character of the beer, bring that mouthfeel, bring that body effect to the level that you want it.
And without, like you said, changing the character, the flavor, the aroma of the beer, being that it really is, well, I'm not going to call it a caramel Pilsner malt because they don't call it that, but it's said to have this Pilsner malt characteristic, only it acts differently on the wort. And so, again, the idea being that if you just toss in basically a little handful of this stuff, a couple, 2 or 3 ounces, then you're going to get better foam retention on beers that you've made in the past that maybe don't have good head retention. You'll get better mouthfeel, stuff like that. So, it seems like a really good solution to a very common problem. I guess the question is, does it do what it's sold as doing? And that's what we thought we would test out. Real quick, Ray, are there any downsides, like any downsides to using Carapils? I would think that if you go, and this is the only thing I could come up with, if you go a little bit too high, you're going to end up with an unfermentable beer.
Yeah. So Brice markets it as basically having no to minimal effect on final gravity or anything like that when used in, kind of reasonable percentages, as much as 10% or so. The other side of that, though, is that, there's a couple downsides I can see. Number one is that, quite frankly, if you go to the local homebrew store, specialty malts of any kind cost, usually about double of, what your base malt costs. So there is a small, usually, because you're usually not using very much of it, but there is a small cost effect of using a Carapils malt in place of base malt, if you will. The other side, if you used way too much, if you used a huge amount of it because it's non-enzymatic, you would have essentially a mash that wouldn't convert.
Well, and that's that right. Commonly believed that would be the case. I actually recall, and I might be wrong on this, and when I did a Google search just now, I couldn't find anything. But some dude out there a couple of years ago did a 100% Carapils beer. I think it was like a 1 gallon batch, and found that it actually did convert, and well, whether it converted or if it just imparted the sugars that were already, crystallized on the inside of the kernel, but it actually fermented as well, which I thought was pretty interesting. I don't recall what his tasting notes were.
Yeah, that's interesting. It would, Brice says it is steepable.
Well, yeah, that's what I did. When I was brewing extract with steeping grains, Carapils was always just a part of the, what made up my bag that I tossed into the sweet wort from the extract.
Right, and as I understand it, actually, some of the extracts that are manufactured actually include a portion of dextrin malt or Carapils in the right in the extract.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. So it sounds like other than maybe the fact that you if you use too much, you might not have a wort that's as fermentable as you expected. There really are no other downsides to using Carapils except for the cost, maybe. And which leaves me wondering at what point. And this is something I guess we can sort of discuss in a bit when we get to the experiment, but maybe test out a little bit more in the future as well. At what point does Carapils actually have an impact on the flavor and aroma of a beer?
I guess we'll have to find out.
Definitely. So we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be focusing on an experiment that we did comparing a beer with Carapils to one without Carapils. If, like me, you prefer the simpler side of brewing beer, you have got to check out the Brew Bag, a food-safe fabric filter that allows for mashing of the finest crushed grain without risking the dreaded stuck sparge. I've been recommending these things since I started using them. They are awesome. The Brew Bag offers the only completely reinforced fabric filter for brewing that can be used over 100 times and comes in sizes that fit most mash tuns, or you can even have one custom made. Go check the Brew Bag out at brewinabag.com and be sure to use promo code TBP17 to get 10% off your order of $30 or more. So it was almost exactly a year ago, Ray, that you decided to test out the impact Carapils has on a beer.
I had been using it habitually for the first part of my brewing and then just sort of stopped and didn't include it in any recipes for the next few years. And I don't remember if it came up with a comment or if I had, if I'd even just seen a recipe at some point that used a bunch of Carapils and I went, why are you using it? That brought up the idea of trying this malt out again. So I wanted to, put it to the test.
Yeah, I had gotten to the point in my brewing where, again, given this kind of conviction that I had that, and I don't know where it came from, that Carapils was just a sea malt made lower kiln Pilsner malt. That it was so essentially what I would do is if I was using any portion of other caramel or crystal malt in my recipe, I would just not include Carapils. And anecdotally, my experience was that it didn't make any difference. I was still getting totally fine head retention and lacing and that creamy foam that all of us are kind of pine for when it comes to making beer. And so I was curious myself as well. I'd started leaving out Carapils from some recipes that I was sharing online, and people were asking me, how's your head retention? You don't have any Carapils in there. So I was pretty excited for you to address this variable in an experiment.
Yeah. So to do it, Breeze says it's good at 2 to 3% to get some of these benefits, but as is our sort of method, we want to really see if there's a flavor impact, a beer quality impact on this. So we pushed it up to sort of Breeze's the highest percentage usage that I could find them actually explicitly recommending, which was 10%, which fortunately was really easy. For a 5.5 gallon batch with a 10 pound grain bill, that was super easy to just get the 1 pound bag of Carapils at the local homebrew shop, and just add it to the grind and take out a pound of pale malt in the base recipe. So in essence, you brewed 2 batches on separate setups, separate but identical setups. One of them was 10 pounds of pale malt, or 9 3/4 pounds pale malt. It looks like you added a little bit of something else in there, 4 ounces of honey malt. And the other one was 8.75 pounds of pale malt with 1 pound of Carapils to make up that difference. And then the same 4 ounces, a little splash of honey malt in there. Looks like you mashed both at the same 153 degrees Fahrenheit temperature, which I failed to look up the Celsius on that one. I apologize. Boiled them for 60 minutes, fermented them the same with the same yeast, which was WLP090 San Diego Super Yeast, in the same chamber next to each other, controlled to 66 degrees Fahrenheit or 19 degrees Celsius. So everything except for the Carapils was identical on these beers. Yeah, and it made really no difference when brewing, although I did end up with a slightly lower original gravity from the Carapils beer, incidentally, which was something I wasn't really expecting. Looking at my hydrometers there, I did find about 3 points lower original gravity. But when I kind of reviewed it later, the potential gravity from Carapils is a bit lower than base malt, so it actually wasn't wasn't out of line with what one would expect.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. You've got these. It's different malt. Different malts do different things.
Yeah, and so they both got matching starters of San Diego Super Yeast. They were pitched at the same time, same temperature, and the Carapils batch was actually a little bit less vigorous initially in ferment, although not dramatically so. But then they ended up finishing exactly the same on the final gravity, both fermented down to 10-12.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, I guess, on some level. Carapils is a different malt than Pilsner, and maybe it's not as hot of a malt as standard pale malt. I mean, and so the fact that it reacted a little bit differently in the mash, I guess, isn't too surprising to me. What I do wonder though is how the fermentability of that wort, given the fact that it now contained a higher amount of these long chain dextrins.
Yeah, and so to get the ferment underway, I just made up a couple of 1,200 milliliter starters of White Labs San Diego Super Yeast, and pitched them into identical wort at the same time and the same temperature. Fermented them side by side. I did notice the batches looked quite similar, although looking at the pictures now, the Carapils batch was slightly less vigorous in terms of the initial krausen. Much like most of my beers, I don't get to see them too much along the way, just because I travel so much for work, and I end up, pitching yeast and then going away for a week, and coming back to beer that's ready to be kegged. But when I finally did pull them out of the fermenters and get them kegged up, they had finished at exactly the same final gravity of 10-12. So despite starting a little bit lower OG, the Carapils did ferment down to the same, which to me says that actually the apparent attenuation was slightly less on the Carapils batch than on the,
which for me is to be expected, right? The OG thing, I didn't really know what to predict, though. Not terribly surprising, again, because it is a different malt than pale malt. But I fully expected, as this showed, that the attenuation on the Carapils batch would be somewhat lower, and that makes sense because there are more unfermentable sugars in that wort.
Well, that's the whole idea, right? Exactly. To leave more of those dextrins in solution.
Right. So it did its job in that respect.
Yeah. And so then we did what we always do, which is put this batch into our tasting panels of triangle tests. The participants were given one sample of the beer with the Carapils included, and 2 samples of the base malt only version. And of course, we got a minimum of 20 participants in this experiment.
Okay, we need to let people in on something. We have a saying over here at Brülosophy where we refer to it as pulling array. And this is a little side note. Pulling array is when you brew these beers for an experiment, and the purpose of these beers, as good as they might be, is to collect data that we can then share to make the homebrewing world better. But pulling array means that you drink those beers before you collect all the data. We also have a rule, kind of a rule that we collect data from a minimum of 20 participants for each experiment, which, I know some people say that's not enough, but it's tough to get 20 participants at times. Well, in this experiment, Ray pulled a Ray. He only got 11 participants. And so there's a reason we published it and we didn't hold it off, though, because in order for us to say that the findings were significant, that the Carapils had a noticeable impact, at least in terms of distinguishability, 7 of those tasters would have had to correctly identify the odd beer out in the triangle test, and only 2 did. That's pretty shocking. Now, if it had been something like 5 or 6, I think we probably would have just repeated the experiment. And we certainly plan to do that in the future. But only 2 out of 11 of the participants were able to choose or able to guess the unique sample in the triangle test.
Right. And one of the things to remember is that the statistic model that we use on this yielded a p-value of 0.95. Which is this is not explicitly correct interpretation of a p-value, but essentially means that it is about 95% likely that the result was a result of random chance, not any particular effect that was real.
Well, in the same way that there's no amount of rationalization on your part that's going to get you off the hook for pulling a Ray, there's really no amount of extrapolation on this one that's going to make it look like the Carapils actually had a noticeable impact on at least on terms of flavor, aroma, and mouthfeel of the beer. And I think that last one is really deserving of a little bit more focus, because that's what we would expect. I didn't get to taste these beers. Ray, you can tell us what your experiences were like, but at least based on participant performance, it would seem that the beers shared a similar mouthfeel, that the body was about the same. What was your experience like with these?
My experience with these, now, in my own defense,
it's not going to work.
I avoided drinking from these taps during the testing thing. One of the things I always do is I mark one of my one that I'm only using one sample of. I usually have it be the one that I tell guests and stuff to drink. And as it happened on this batch, whether it's my wife, I would never blame my wife for anything, or friends and family. But this beer was super tasty, and it ended up that one tap ran dry. That said, in the samples that I had done, I usually, when I have a experiment participant over to drink the beers and that sort of thing, I usually have some on my own and sample them side by side. Often have them put me through a triangle test after they've completed. I could not tell. These beers were identical in every way.
When I think about, I guess maybe it's different nowadays, but rewind, over a year ago, if I thought about a beer that someone had told me, if you had handed me a beer and you said, in the recipe, I used 10%, it was 1 pound of Carapils to 9 pounds of pale malt. I'm telling you that I not only would have expected the beer to be like syrupy and maybe even sweet, but I probably would have experienced it that way as well, right? We have this tendency to kind of find what we're expecting to find, and to perceive those things that we think are going to be there based on recipe and process stuff. The fact that only 2 out of 11 tasters, guessed the odd beer out really blew my mind on this experiment, because what I believed for over 12 years of brewing was that Carapils had this crazy impact at just 2 or 3% of the grist on the mouthfeel of a beer.
Well, and I'm not one to go back and try and critique somebody else's beer recipe. That's not whether it does anything or not. There's a million great beers out there that do include Carapils. First and foremost to my mind is that Vinny at Russian River, I think pretty much all of his IPAs use Carapils plus some simple sugar, dextrose. Dextrose usually, I think.
Right, to increase the fermentability.
To increase the fermentability,
really
yeah, and then but then I think the concept behind the Carapils is to make that beer not feel overly thin or dry. Yeah, but I can't help but wonder, why would it actually be, basically would Pliny the Elder be the same beer without Carapils, or is he picking up on a flavor compound that I'm just not getting?
Yeah, and the other question is he still using Carapils in that recipe? I mean, the one that's the popular Pliny recipe that's out there on the internet, I believe hit the webs something like 2009. So, anyways, you made a comment after that experiment was published and kind of got a lot of attention because a lot of people use Carapils. You commented that it might seem like Carapils actually negatively impacted foam retention based on your observations of the beers poured into clear glasses.
Yeah, And this was one of those things that I never expected. But every time I poured these beers, when I would look at them, I would pick them out visually wrong. You know, there was one of the beers that always maintained nice lacing down the glass. One of them always had a little foam ring with just a skim, like a cloud layer over the top, even on the smallest of glasses of beer foam. The other one, quite frankly, didn't. Didn't lace very much, didn't do much. And every time I made this observation, which was 3 or 4 times over the course of this beer. Now, to be honest, me saying this does sort of cut down on the credibility of, hey, I didn't drink these beers. I can't help. I kept getting it wrong. The Carapils beer was consistently the one with less foam, less lacing, less head. To the point that I was assuming that the glasses were dirty. I was washing glasses. I was rinsing them in Star San. I was doing all this stuff, to try and make sure it wasn't some other thing.
And I'm presuming both were equally carbonated. We have similar carbonation methods, and we make sure that the beers are as similar as they can possibly be in all respects except the variable being tested before we collect data. But just a quick glance, at the picture that you posted in that article, comparing both the full tasting glasses of the beers, as well as the well emptied glasses of the beers. I'm totally with you. What I'm noticing is the one without the Carapils actually has it's not like a big thick head of foam, but it's definitely got a thicker layer of white on top of the nice pale beer than the Carapils beer does, and the glass very obviously has more sticky lacing kind of sitting around on the glass than the beer with the Carapils does, which is just it's kind of mind-boggling given what we're to expect from adding Carapils to a beer.
Yeah, and this was I replicated this time and time again with these beers, and to the point that I wasn't taking I didn't take pictures of it every time because I just assumed that there was some other factor, whether it was, soap residue on the Carapils glass, or whatever. But the ones I finally did the pictures of, this was a batch. This was like a set of cups where I washed and then rinsed both cups with Star San, let them dry, filled them up, and then drank them, sip for sip going, they're only 4-ounce glasses, but sip for sip going down the glass. Back and forth. I remember
you saying last year when you did this test that you actually, after you emptied the glasses once, you went and swapped the glasses and filled them up with the separate beers just in case, just to test it out, and you had the same results.
Yeah, it was total. I was completely unsurprised that the result was the beers tasted the same. That wasn't a huge surprise to me. But I was surprised to see the foam result being really the opposite of what I expected.
I don't think you're the only one who was surprised to see that, because it's kind of like a double whammy against Carapils. And, we love Breeze, don't get me wrong, but, it's supposed to improve mouthfeel, which you'd think would be distinguishable at 10% of the grist. It didn't seem to do that very much, if at all. And it's also supposed to improve, foam retention and lacing, which it seems it almost had a negative impact on. And so why continue using it, at least on the homebrew scale? And I know this is just one experiment that only had 11 participants. But it seems to me like the evidence kind of is stacking up against Carapils.
Yeah. So, much like what we said earlier about not generalizing, I mean, it seems reasonable to me that Carapils could do nothing in an all malt beer mashed at 153 like I did, and have an impact on Pliny the Elder mashed at 148 with a bunch of sugar thrown in.
Or maybe have an impact on like an extract beer. Like that's where I keep going. Is it seems like Carapils might actually play a decent role and maybe even produce a distinguishable difference when compared to, let's say, an extract beer made with 100% light DME versus one made with a pound less of DME and, a pound of Carapils. At least on my level of thinking, that seems like it might actually make a bigger difference than when it's used in a mash where we are controlling, for these things with mash temperature and stuff like that.
Well, and to take that a step further, when we put this into the mash, it supposedly has these dextrins. Well, those dextrins don't have any, as far as I understand it, don't have any armor, if you will, against those same enzymes from the base malt, breaking them down further. This is the one thing I never really understood about Carapils is why would one expect, these long chain polysaccharides to not have the same, not get
chopped up.
Yeah, not get broken down by the same enzymes that are doing that in the base malt also.
Right. Well, and there's you mentioned this earlier that this is just one of a few different dextrin malts that are out there, and there's one that I've been noticing a lot in recipes lately, particularly for pale lagers, and it's actually included in the recipe that we were given by the folks at Freem Beer Company. Their Pilsner is probably one of my favorites right now, up there with Chuckanut's Pilsner. It's absolutely delicious. And they use Carafoam, which, we've got experiments planned to test out the impact of Carafoam, but it's said to have the similar effect as Carapils on mouthfeel and foam retention, but it also adds a slightly sweet flavor to the beer as well. I'm not sure if you've ever played around with that.
I haven't used Carafoam, only I think because most of the homebrew shops, at least where I am, seem to carry Carapils. And they're treated by some homebrewers or by most, I think, by the industry, if you will, the homebrewing industry, as being completely interchangeable.
That's how I've seen it. Yeah, people seem to talk about them. Whatever one you can get, use.
But when this experiment came out, I know our contributor Matt, he uses Carafoam and is fairly convinced that it is, quote unquote real, if you will. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the comparison, the Carafoam versus no Carafoam comparison that we will be working on here very shortly. I know some people who swear by Carafoam, which, by the way, is a ExBEERiment product. They swear on it because it actually adds some character to the beer in terms of flavor and aroma as well. So that will be coming. Until then, Ray, what's your process? What's your plan for Carapils? Do you still use it when you brew?
I don't. One of the things I think I should add is that after seeing this result, I did start doing a bit more research, and I found a study that was done by Kultgen, which I think is the student's name, who works under Charlie Bamforth at UC Davis, or did at least a few years back when they published this in 2016. That did various foam testing on various things, and essentially found that Carapils was significantly foam negative compared to two-row.
So this observation that you had, that the Carapils didn't lace the glass as much and had actually lower foam than the non-Carapils batch, is supported by some science out there.
Yeah, and I didn't know this going in, but in fact, in their testing, in the chart that they've got, essentially every one of the crystal malts or Carapils, I'm lumping in with those were all basically foam negative. But wheat was quite foam positive. Victory was quite foam positive. But the big stars in terms of foam production were roasted barley and black patent malt.
That's what I've heard. Yeah, and when you think about the beers that are made using those malts, I guess it's not too surprising. Stouts and porters and those types of dark beers are kind of known for that nice creamy foam. Well, I hate to make it sound like I'm accepting this single result as dogma, and I'm not. But from that experiment on, I have not used Carapils in a single batch. If I did which maybe I have. But if I did, it was just to get rid of it. I no longer stock it in my brewery, and I have no plans to use it in the future. I just don't see the point. I do think that we really ought to explore the impact it might have on extract beers, and I've added that to the list. So you should see that in the future. But as for me, Carapils no longer is necessary. And I'll tell you what, my beers get all of the body and the head retention that I'm looking for. So the change hasn't had a negative impact on me. Ray, anything else on Carapils? I can't believe that we were able to talk about a single grain, a single ingredient for this amount of time. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
I don't think I have a lot to add. This was very interesting. This is one of my favorite experiments I've done. Because partly because it does, clash with what my expectations were. But partly because it just led to me uncovering this study from UC Davis. And it makes me really interested to try, black patent malt. I think it's Jake that actually sometimes adds like a 0.5% of black patent malt or what have you to like a light lager.
For color adjustment. Yeah.
And it makes me wonder what that, if that's enough to have an impact on its foam.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a great experiment too. And, I hopefully people enjoyed hearing about our thoughts and our experiments on Carapils as much as we did talking about it. All right. If you like what we're doing here and you want to help us bring you more, head over to brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can help us out. And don't forget to check out the rewards you can get for supporting us at patreon.com/brülosophy. If you have any questions you want answered on a future Brew & A episode, you can email them to me, Marshall@brülosophy.com. Or if you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you can ask there too. If you'd be so kind as to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back soon with the next episode of the Brülosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.